Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this special, very special edition of the Circus of Safety. This is not going live. This is a special recording that we're doing as part of a series of recordings called the Circus of Safety Gets Serious-ish. And you will notice immediately that Brenton Harrison, our usual host, isn't present. So that'll be a bit of a rest for your ears. And you've got me today, Andy Evans, hosting this show. And with me, we've got Circus of Safety regular Des Link. Morning, Des. How's things going?
Good morning. Very good, thanks. And yourself? How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very excited about today's show. And our special guest today is Chris Peace. Do I call you Dr. Chris Peace, or is it just Chris Peace?
Just Chris.
Are you sure?
Yes.
I don't want to not highlight your work in the academic field. So, but Chris is good for me too. So, good morning, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's nearly the end of the academic year, and I'm looking forward to Christmas. So, yay!
Fantastic. Have you still got students around at the moment, or have they long departed?
No, I only teach postgraduate students, but whether it's postgrad or undergrad, the trimester 2 finished and all the marking got done. The marks have been published, so some people are very happy and some not so happy. But then there are a few students who are doing studies in trimester 3. And yesterday, Tuesday, we had a meeting with some of our PhD students and just sort of chilled out and online and talked about life, the universe, and everything.
Fantastic. So I guess I should back up a step and say actually part of this series is linked to the New Zealand Journal of Health and Safety Practice. Which Dr. Chris, which Chris has been behind and been certainly a significant player in. When these were started to be published last year, the three of us in the circus clearly read them all, and we thought, well, it'd be a great idea if we could start to do some interviews with some of the authors of these articles and try and raise the profile of what we think is a great journal, and help people get engaged with it a little bit more. So part of the first part of this journey is to actually engage with the man himself, Chris. And this is the first of a series of shows that we're hoping to do and continue to do over the next while. So, Chris, could you you've given a little bit of an introduction to yourself. Could you just give us a bit more of a detailed introduction to your background?
Oh, yeah. Well, 2024 was the 50th anniversary of graduating, first time round in Boston University in Birmingham. And it was also the 50th anniversary of the British Health and Safety at Work Act, and of course the 50th anniversary of ACC in New Zealand, none of which really came to my mind. It just happened that here we were clogging along. We were, for various reasons, I'd ended up as a lecturer at Vic University, and there'd been a lot going on. So how did I get there? A lot of accidents of history. The honest truth, I didn't set out to get a PhD 50 years ago. I certainly didn't set out to become a lecturer. But it's just opportunities. I think there's a saying, chance favors the prepared mind. And just as I've been thinking, gosh, something interesting like that, and along it would come, and here I am. So I'd finished my PhD after 6 years part-time when I was freelancing, and the then head of the School of Health in the university rang me up and said, we need a bit of help with something. Can you help us out? That was the end of 2019. Would you like to stay on and be a teaching fellow in 2020? Oh, yeah, that's okay. And then the job that I've got was advertised. And as I've said to many people, that I thought they'd be nuts if they hired me, because I was just turned 70 and the ink's still drying on my PhD. I'm still here 5 years later. So it's yeah, that's me. I've worked freelance. I've worked on the inside. I've worked in regulatory roles. And as I say, now I'm an academic, having the delight of helping people achieve what they want.
And you enjoying the role?
Sorry, am I
Enjoying the role? Enjoying
Oh,
the
yeah.
lecturing?
It like any job, you get your frustrations, but you also get these wonderful moments. For example, one guy who started off at the beginning of trimester 1 last year, he took a couple of weeks and he said to me at one point, I don't know, I can't understand where I'm going with this. I don't know what I'm doing here. And then a week or two later, obviously the lights had turned on and he started telling me stories about, well, I can access the library and I've been sitting at my desk in the office. Boss doesn't know what I've been doing. I've been downloading all of the articles I can read later. I said, do you know how many there are? There are about 500,000 articles published every year. And you're just downloading handfuls of them. Yeah, he said, but some of them are so really, really interesting. That was one absolute delight. And other students who have gone the same way. And they come back at the end of a trimester and say, are you sure you did the marking right? What do you mean? Well, I got an A. I thought I was going to be failing. No, you actually got an A plus. Wow.
That's fantastic, isn't it? That's really fantastic, that feeling.
They're really, really wonderful. I don't tell the vice chancellor, otherwise I think I don't need to be paid, but
yeah, absolutely. So no, I mean that's great, and understanding your background a little bit is always helpful. So can we just move on to the journal a little bit, which I guess is the real crux of what we're trying to talk about here. So it's the New Zealand Journal of Health and Safety Practice, and I think, is it the third one has just been published? Would that be right?
Yeah, it's the first, volume 1, edition 3, 2024. The third edition came out, and they've all started in a way that I thought they would head, but then turned out to be different. Inevitably, you start on a project like this, and it never goes as you thought it would. And I can see it's going to be the same in 2025. I suppose the first thing is to understand where the journal came from. What was the idea behind it? When I'd finished my PhD, there were several things I wanted to take from my thesis, rewrite and turn into articles and get them published. And one place that I wanted to get them into was the IOSH, the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health journal in the UK, the Policy and Practice in Health and Safety. And the ink was still drying on one of the articles, and they sent an email to all authors and said, actually, we've stopped the funding for this. We want to do something different with the money. And there was then a 2-year hunt to find something somewhere. There's a system, Social Science Research Network, and you can publish in there free of charge, and it's open access. But to set up a journal, they want $10,000 as a starting fee, and we didn't have that kind of money. And then somebody said, well, the university, of course, has got a platform you can use. And that then took several months of work to get approval, to get the design work, and then started thinking about the authors. And at the moment, the journal's pretty conventional in the way it's numbered. Volume 1, edition 1 was April, actually published in May in 2024. And I went round and shoulder tapped people quite honestly and openly and said, you've done some work on this. Why don't you write an article? Or in one case, you did a master's thesis on this. Why don't you convert it into an article? And most of the people had some idea how to write, but they perhaps needed a bit of guidance. And then I realized, well, June 1974, to get my dates right, was actually when I graduated, and the British Health and Safety at Work Act was published in July, or came into force in July 74. And it would be nice to mark that. And at the time, I'd completely forgotten about ACC. So I sent round, proverbially speaking, I sent round a collection plate to people and said, you know, you've got a story to tell. And Deanne Brabant, for example, I knew had done a great presentation at a conference. I think it was one of the Safeguard conferences. And she said, yeah, sure, she would turn that into an article. And other people came along and, yeah, they said they would write. And suddenly we had a really great collection of articles coming along. And then Ms. Van Velden, the minister, said she wanted to consult on reform of the health and safety system. So some of the articles were slightly changed, not manipulated, but the authors happily changed them to make points about what we've got is pretty jolly good.
Yeah.
I had to intervene, and this is something we'll talk about in another session, how did I persuade people to write, and what did I end up doing for the future with that. So the second edition came out, and it's had some reasonable success of people downloading articles and coming back to say, yeah, I read that, and that was really helpful. One of the things I've always been saying to authors is, please write plain English. Don't write academic gobbledygook. I want plain English that will not be a barrier to anybody. The length might be a barrier, so only write what you need to write to give the message. I made a mistake with the third edition, quite honestly. That was going to be the Hazan's conference, and next time, in what'll it be, 2026, if an abstract is accepted for presentation at the conference, unless somebody opts out, the abstract will go straight into the journal. But this time, the volume 1, edition 3, I had to go around and shoulder tap people and say, you did a presentation, do you want to send me the abstract? And some people did, some didn't. There were some pieces of work that are going to require time to complete. But bingo, we got 3 editions out. So yeah.
I mean, clearly a lot of this is down to you. What were the biggest challenges for you in that? What was it finding the time to do it, or
yeah,
or was
that... nights and weekends is when either I did the work on the journal nights and weekends, or I did it daytime and then had to do my paid work nights and weekends. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Next volume 2, edition 1, I'll be spreading the work out with other people, and that's started already as we're sort of speaking, getting other people to peer review, anonymously review articles that have come in. I did that for the first volume, but there will, I think, be more that I've got to find reviewers for, and then go to somebody to be the copy editor who takes what you think looks nice and put it into the frame and the format for the journal, the same font, the same point size, and so on.
So when I've read through, I think the vast majority of articles are from New Zealand based. Is the intention that this becomes a place where people from overseas could look to submit articles as well? Is that part of it? It's not just to be New Zealand people. It's
no. Well, if you look in the third edition, there's one article in there I did shoulder tap people for. Christine Keane at the Health and Safety Laboratory, which is part of the British Health and Safety Executive, I got in touch with her and said, look, you and your colleagues have written some really great research reports. Any chance you could turn some of that material into an article for us, please, please? And she went away and talked to a couple of colleagues and came back and said, yeah, we'll do something for you on dust. We've got the data. We've not published it anywhere else. And they wrote an article that if anybody is working in the space of dust exposures, and their work was particularly in the waste industry in the UK, it's an article that's really well worth reading. They volunteered and said they'll tell colleagues who might also be interested in getting published. I mean, it's open access, online, and at the moment, no article processing charges, which...
Yes.
I don't know if you know.
It's almost a dream, isn't it, for somebody that's trying to move into the sort of academic research space? It's a phenomenal opportunity for people to get their work published. And I guess at some point you'll be doing the opposite of shoulder tapping. The articles will just be flying towards you.
Oh, that's actually happening from Volume 2, Edition 1.
Fantastic.
A phone call from somebody, another academic, who said, I've got some students whose work looks pretty good. I know what you want for the next edition, but their work isn't anything to do with that. Would you consider it? I said, absolutely, please. And if they want to send a draft, I'll tell them what I think might need to go this way or that way. Which doesn't stop it going out to an anonymous reviewer. Other people have said they've committed to sitting down and writing Christmas, New Year into January and getting something to me for the end of January. And I know that we've already got 2 articles that have been submitted for that edition without any shoulder tapping. So I'm beginning to get a big smile on my face, but also a frown, because I know if we get to a steady flow of 8 to 10 articles in each edition, that's going to be a bit of a workload. But then it's great all round. It's getting people noticed. And
I guess with that, you will also perhaps people will start to become interested in assisting the development of the journal rather than just writing articles as well. So I imagine people will start to appear that will say, actually, Chris, can we help with this? Because it's that whole association with something that's successful that people love.
Well, yeah, I mean, the second edition next year is going to be a conference edition for the New Zealand Occupational Hygiene Society. And I've said to them, do what I didn't quite do for the Hazans conference. Tell people who submit abstracts, this will go into the journal unless you object. And then I said to the person who's organizing that conference, if you want to be a guest editor for that part of the journal, you're on.
That's experience, Chris. That's experience of being a consultant. That's
well, you get to do the work.
101.
But I think I've got the same thing happening with the first edition next year, in 25, that will be, it will be something about International Workers' Memorial Day. And some of the people who've said yes, they'll write. One of them I've made the same offer to. If you can bring together 2 or 3 articles, then you can be the guest editor because you'll know the topic. And so it begins, instead of me trying to find common threads and read stuff so I can write the editorial, I'd rather be what I've set the pattern for, an editorial that simply says from the editor that I was told I'm chief editor, so I just write a short paragraph or 2 saying welcome, and somebody else writes the clever stuff.
So I guess just out of interest, and we haven't touched on this before, is who owns the journal?
It's you use that, and I'll put a smile on my face. It's a slightly strange way to put it. If you use capitalist terms, it's owned by the university.
Okay.
And the platform is run by the university. And it isn't the only journal. There are half a dozen or 10 other journals that the university publishes, but I don't have anything to do with them. So the university owns it, but different organizations in Hazans put up some of the money that we have in the bank that will pay the person who does the copy editing.
Okay.
In terms of, do I have any ownership? I think I've invested intellectual capital in it.
I guess that was where I was going with the question. Is that you've clearly put a lot of intellectual capital into it, and I was just out of curiosity, as being a consultant myself who develops all sorts of resources for people. It's always interesting to understand where the ownership of things lie.
Yeah, if I stopped, somebody else would have to take over. Who might that be? I don't know at the moment. I haven't. There's no succession planning for the chief editors. Thinking about it as we're talking, I know some of the things that will have to happen. Anyway, that's. Yeah. Any other questions then?
Yeah. I think Des is trying desperate to chip in here. Des, you got a question or a comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. And it seems, based on what you've described, that there was a fairly obvious gap in accessibility to journals and articles, and I think you've done a pretty good job in filling that gap, while also making it accessible to both the readers and the writers to contribute. And I'm just thinking, in your opinion and in your time, do you think there's been an increased uptake in engagement with academia by health and safety practitioners?
Ooh. If I give a highly qualitative, one-eyed view of that, yes. My colleagues, Joanne Crawford and Danny Anderson and I, the three of us have done a fair bit of muscling our way onto the front of the stage. We had to at one stage because the job was under threat. The university needed to justify all of the teaching programs. And I think a lot of people have realized that at one level, if they start studying and get a master's with us, then it isn't just a piece of paper. It's sort of mid-career, midlife qualification. And yes, it's academic. And whoa, I have to go and learn about journal articles. I have to justify my opinion with evidence. I have to learn how to write something where I'm bringing in the evidence. And that's for some of the people who I can call students, but who are also, a lot of them are practitioners who know more about their particular field than I ever will. It's been a revelation. And some of them are quite open in talking on LinkedIn and at NZHSJP meetings about what they've got out of it. The sense of the strength of engaging with us, and this morning I had an email from somebody who'd been a student, and I looked and thought, oh, Emma, oh yeah. And she, when I first knew her as a student, she had done a bachelor's, which was one part of a double major in the School of Management. And she was a great student. And then the next time I actually met her, she was graduating with the second part of her double major. And she had gone through doing at least the graduate diploma, the postgrad diploma with us. I can't honestly remember if she did the master's research project, but she told me today she has now got a permanent full-time job as a health and safety person, and she, I think, is one of the future people for health and safety who's got that degree of knowledge. And is there a greater engagement with academia? Yes. I'm doing around 10 webinars a year for the Institute of Safety Management. When I started, it was because Selena Armstrong had said, could you do something on fact or fiction? Where do we get factual information, evidence from? And that's a line that I continue to push. I've got big plans for 2025 on how to change the approach and get the people who are watching and listening involved in an applied research project. I've got to have a meeting later on today, which will, I hope, confirm the details, and then I can go public on that. But that's the plan, to actually get health and safety practitioners involved in applied research. The strength of numbers, the weight of evidence from several hundred people who've participated, that makes it very strong evidence.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you touched on something in your answer there that I wanted to ask you about, with the idea of having multiple majors influence some of the thinking in the journal. Do you anticipate that it'll continue to be a cross-disciplinary journal?
Oh, yes. Yeah. It has to be. I've been trying with some of the other organizations that are members of HASANS, without great success to this point, which is probably a reflection of my bloody mindedness and poking my nose in to say, oi, don't forget about us. But I have made the point with HASANS that the journal is the HASANS House Journal. And that really tickled Mike O'Brien, the chair of the HASANS thing. It really got him, I think. It's having an academic journal as part of several professional bodies is, I think, one of the breakpoints, one of the stages in the development of a profession, as opposed to a collection of practices and practitioners. So yeah, I think we're getting there.
Well, that's cool. It was interesting that you talked about evidence, because that's one of the things that Des frequently bores me within conversations. It's about what is and what isn't evidence. So it's great to hear that I'm getting this in stereo now. So clearly it's an area for me to do some more work on. It's been a real pleasure spending this time with you, Chris. Certainly understanding the origins of this fabulous journal that that's been developed in New Zealand here. And like I said at the start, what we're trying to do is we're trying to go through and interview as many or engaging conversations with as many of the authors of articles as we can, just to try and help raise the profile of it, which I think fits quite nicely in what you were just talking to Des about, is that actually reading, working out what's real and what isn't, that critical thinking is really absolutely an essential skill for anybody in the safety field. And I think if we can help in any way to increase the level of critical thinking among safety professionals and other professionals that have got an interest in safety, I think that can only be a good thing. So thank you ever so much for your time, Chris. It's been an absolute delight. Thanks for your input, Des.
Yeah,
some final words there, Chris?
Yeah, just a quick closing thought for the listeners and watchers. It's free. Even if you everything that's written in an article, download the articles, read them, and start thinking about them. It's free. We're not trying to compete with Safeguard magazine. We're just trying to lift the thinking and evidence base of health and safety in New Zealand and beyond.
Yeah, and I think on behalf of all the safety professionals that I know, Chris, I think it's great what you've done. So thank you ever so much, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again soon.
Cheers.
Thanks
Thanks very
guys.
much.